thought that,
Oh.
yes, I thought that our warm-up chat wasn't the best thing to be recorded, so now maybe we should launch the meeting. So welcome everybody, and I suppose there may be others who join us during the hour that we have, but we obviously have an opportunity to have some really great discussions involving everybody if we are a small group. So let's make the most of that, because that will spark off other people's thinking. So welcome to this meeting where I think we're considering for the first time the Earth Charter and its meaning for us and for us individually, and what we might be doing over the next few months. So Norman, I think you proposed an overarching question about whether or not the Earth Charter was helpful for us, and ways into that thinking might be by thinking about the statement of values and beliefs that we have or might be partway through developing, and also the ideas for what we might do as our project, our initiative, our next steps. Did you want to say something, Norman? I mean, I've tried to
not really. I think it's just how we as individuals react to that very comprehensive statement.
Yes.
And if I just sort of kick off my overarching feeling, it's an incredibly useful synthesis of ideas and principles for how humanity might do better in terms of learning to live on this planet in a way that is more equitable and socially just and kind to the environment and kind to nature. But we're a million miles from the ideals that are in the document itself. So it's very much an aspirational charter, and I think it's been around for over 20 years now. So my first reaction is I think it's not had very much impact at all, other than at individual level. There are a few people, and I got insight into this when I went to the conference on the Earth Charter back in when was it? A couple of months ago now, and there was a lot of very passionate people there who were almost evangelical about the way they saw this this framework for how we might live, and it was truly international. But there is a very, very strong, if you like, axis of belief in it in America and South America. That was a very strong feeling I got. And Central America, I should say, the Americas, let's say. And to some extent, I think that's where the focus for its original development came from, and the impetus for the development came from. So I think my overarching feeling is, yeah, it's a very useful thing, but until it's picked up and acted upon at all levels, but predominantly at the highest level, then it's unlikely to make a lot of progress. So I think the potential is there, but we are at the moment clearly falling well short in many areas. And I do despair, as I'm sure many of you despair, at the politics and the war and the poverty and the social injustice that are all around us, and despair at how anything like this can have an impact on it. So that's my sort of initial feeling about the Charter.
Do you feel, can I just check, do you feel that the UN overarching framework that we had before was different in scale, or do you feel the same things about?
There's an interesting relationship between this and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This actually preceded it. The drafting of this Earth Charter preceded it. Actually, Gorbachev was one of the main people who got involved in this early on. So it was way back in the early 1987, I think, was where it kicked off. And then there was a Rio summit, and there was an attempt to get this document out at that summit, which failed, and then it was gradually redrafted through the 1990s. So there's a long history. And the SDGs came in as the dominant force in terms of a framework for the UN to work with. And you can see why, because it's clear that SDGs are clearly setting goals and objectives and targets that governments and organizations work to in order to not only try and achieve something but monitor progress against. Whereas this document is not of that kind, really. So, and although UN recognizes it, it's not sort of fully integrated it into its thinking. So in a sense, you might think this is the ideological framework and the philosophical framework underpins the SDGs, but the UN has not really nailed its colours to the mast and said that. So it recognizes it and sees it as a valuable document, but it's not in any way sort of integrated into the thinking, as far as I can see anyway, around and supporting the SDGs. And I think that's the current stage that the Earth Charter movement's at, is trying to relate the two frameworks together in some way, I guess, to create more of a synergy between them.
Yeah. What do others think about that? Yes, Russ.
When I read the statements, or the commitments, if I could put it like that, they, as Norman summed it up so brilliantly in the word evangelical. I read them and I thought, these are fantastic. Their beliefs. It was almost like hearing people sign up to a religion, a way of life which had principles, it had values, it had generosity, it had concern for other people, and so on. I almost felt as if I'd gone back to Sunday school or something, not in a frivolous way, but those things just came at me, and I thought how big a contrast there is between this and the disgraceful behavior of leaders and our own politicians. In fact, this evening I'm going to be tuning into the live debate between Sunak and Starmer, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of fine words. But when you look at the state of leadership of powerful countries, it's interesting. Norman mentioned Gorbachev. Look at what we've got now in Russia and in other parts of the world. Obviously, we've got a criminal who may convicted criminal in the most powerful country in the world who may become president again, and that sort of thing. So I don't like to be cynical. And in fact, I'm not cynical, because there's always a little bit of hope in me that things will get better, and the good people will just about outnumber the bad people. But it's very hard to be really optimistic and positive about that. But anyway, that's enough of me banging on about that. But I think Norman, he's just summed it up for us really, really well. Not just with the word evangelical, but that kind of analysis of the way things have been, the way things might develop, and the challenges that are out there right now.
I suppose if you think of 1987, I mean, obviously there's a lot of bad or different from that kind of statement of how things could be. But maybe there is also, I'm thinking of 1987 in terms of people's thinking about the planet and so on. Maybe there has been a lot of progress made, whether it was because something like the Earth Charter was created or whether it's been for other reasons. But probably people are thinking more about the planet and its fragility than they might have been in 1987.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'm just trying to take perspective there. So, yeah. What about anyone else with thoughts about the Earth Charter or the link with the Sustainable Development Goals that we have been working with. I mean, particularly what we were looking at was what role the Earth Charter might play for us. Jenny?
Before I answer that question, I jotted down some notes earlier today. One of them was impotent. And I think even if you exercise your right at the ballot, I still feel impotent in actually making progress, because I can't guarantee that whoever is successful, even if it's the person I vote for or the party I vote for, I can't guarantee that they're going to have any impact on any of these things. On the other hand, I also wrote down the word indoctrination, and I think there is a very fine line between the evangelical and the indoctrination of people. So I just throw that one in. But to answer the question about the value, I think at the microcosmic level, it has some value. But obviously, I'm suggesting at the macrocosmic, it doesn't. Even at the microcosmic, I think it was more of a catalyst rather than actually a guide as to what I believe in. I had to read it go away, as I said at the last meeting, and allow things to sort of bubble over and think about them over a few weeks before I actually then came back and sat down and wrote my own statement of values, which, okay, I had been thinking about the other things, but it didn't actually ultimately impact on how I put together my views. So,
Yeah. So initially, what was your reaction when you looked at the Earth Charter, Jenny?
I had a lot of, I had a sense that yes, most of these things I believe in, and I would hope they inform the way I behave and have behaved, if not all of my life, for most of my life, I would hope. So there was certainly an empathy there, but it is idealistic.
Yeah. Okay, that seems to be something that we all have recognized, the difference between what it's saying and how it is.
And maybe if enough of us have that little drip in the ocean, we can achieve something. But
yeah,
and perhaps there is a greater movement, as Norman is suggesting, in the Americas than maybe we have in Europe.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting there's a greater movement, because the people who came to the conference are obviously the people who are promoting it. So I mean, I don't know whether within education, say in general, whether there is much knowledge about this charter. I mean, so I take for example, I only found out about this about maybe a year ago. Now I think I'm pretty good at searching the web and, you know, trying to keep abreast of these sorts of things. And I was appalled that I'd really, I mean, I might have come across it, but not followed it up earlier. It really came to my consciousness about a year ago. And I suspect that's the same with a lot of people. So the movement is so small, and its ability to get the message out to say, look, here are some very interesting perspectives on how we should live as a race, human race. That it's just, the message just isn't penetrating and pervading, certainly education.
Jenny?
I think you mentioned earlier that the SDGs seem to have perhaps superseded things, and because they've got targets, they may be more manageable for people. I've been to 2 or 3 conferences, mental health conferences in the last year or so, in which certainly the SDGs are being mentioned, and health is being seen as fundamental to the way forward.
But that's not surprising, Jenny, given that government has embraced SDGs, and it is permeating down through different organizations. I mean, the environmental NGOs, they all embrace those which SDGs that are relevant to. So in a sense, the UN has done that job of broadcasting that framework. It is now quite well established in education. You know, there are lots of programs now that embrace it, and lots of opportunities within universities. SDGs The use of SDG language, I think, is sort of just permeating the education system. So I'm not surprised that SDGs are influencing thinking and action and behavior in a way that Earth Charter isn't.
Flynn, were you signalling? I couldn't tell whether you were signalling.
Yeah, I'm signalling now.
Yeah.
Earlier, I was just
Okay.
wondering. When I read through, I thought, first of all, this is long, all-encompassing, and I can see. I did research. I thought, where has this come from? And I recognised, therefore, that it preceded the SDGs, and possibly because politicians need targets rather than ideals, because I have no problem with holding ideals as a way to perhaps work towards, because none of us are perfect and we won't do everything, but at least having an ideal gives us, and I felt that this is something that should be known and more people should be aware of it than currently are. And I wish I was back in schools again, because they make great discussion points with children at all ages, and they also make guidelines for how to live. And being involved in another organization that's part of the Council of Europe on teaching of democracy and such like, and peace education, it's really quite interesting to see those things that are there. Having been quite old now and having lived through the fear pre-Gorbachev of the nuclear wipeout, to be returned to that is also part of deja vu through Putin, as this is suggestion there, and through the fact that, and this is not a political statement, although he may repeat it this evening on the discussion, that I was surprised to hear that Starmer would press the button. It was reported. He actually was interviewed and said, would he press the button? And that shook me because, well, because I'm old and I remember. And but he'll be in a bunker, so it'll be okay. And he can promote peace afterwards. And I'm not making a political statement now. I happen with Jenny, I think I agree with pretty much everything that's there. The evangelical part of it is perhaps because it's idealistic. I would say it's idealistic, but it's not a bad set of. It's not a particular. If you were committed, as to use Russ's word, to these things and lived your life in this way, you probably hurt quite a lot. But you'd be resilient because you are holding on to your ideals. So, but I do think again, to reiterate, when I was teaching students or working with school teachers and school leaders, this is a wonderful set of, potentially a set of conduct.
Yeah.
Yeah, a code of conduct, almost.
So is there something about the perspective that if we acknowledge that we're not school age and young people, that we're bringing to this? Because I'm wondering about, I mean, I often seem to see that Gen Z, if that's how we're defining things, but younger people don't have the sorts of issues with things like gender equality that I've encountered in my career dealing with gender equality, and some things are obvious and taken for granted by younger people. Maybe we might say because they're young and they haven't gone into the world, but there are certainly sort of cultural things that seem very different for younger people, and despairing of politics amongst younger people because it doesn't seem to be talking about anything that they think matters, and so on. I mean, obviously, they're young, they will get older, they will have different experiences, but do you think there are perhaps some differences amongst generations? I mean, maybe I'm thinking about this because I'm always thinking about generations in the things that I'm doing, the grandmother stuff. And I have hope for younger generations, hope for them and hope in them, if you see what I mean. Do you recognize that, or do you just think that's kind of young people will realize that their ideals may not be realistic?
You can have ideals and recognize that they're not realistic, but you can still work towards them.
Yeah.
And one of my drivers, my personal drivers in this is that I have grandchildren and I don't want them to be as fearful as many teenagers particularly are now of what the future might be. And as you all know, there's more mental health problems recognized amongst teenagers, maybe the COVID thing that they're blaming sometimes, but because they have the fears that they really shouldn't have growing up, and that certainly I was blessed not having.
Yeah. Russ, you were going to say something as well when I proposed.
Yeah, well, I think Glyn's put it really, really nicely there, and also leading on from your observation about the generation gap or whatever. I think maybe there is cause for more hope and optimism given the questioning nature of young people. I mean, maybe people a generation older than us were saying stuff like that a generation ago. I don't know. And I mean, I constantly have to battle to control my own cynicism, really, because I am desperately trying to be an optimist, but when I look around and I think how many people in power really are committed to making things happen, and is now the amount of power that's wielded by so many leaders and the diversity of those sets of values is so great, and the nature of leadership is so how can I put it, unequal from country to country, that we're talking about a world charter here. It's a massive thing, and it's well, we won't be around to see how things have developed. But I am still trying to do things of a practical nature. And on the 22nd of June, I shall be joining Extinction Rebellion in a demonstration in London, assembling at Park Lane between 11 and 12 and marching to Parliament Square. And I expect it to be quite an upbeat and maybe jolly sounds a bit too frivolous, but an upbeat and cheerful and hopeful experience. But whether it leads to anything is another matter. I've actually sent in an email to Norman a few minutes ago the topics that are going to be in focus as part of that Extinction Rebellion demonstration. And I think it chimes really well with the kind of things in the Earth Charter. Different wordings, but again, the same values, the same moral position, if you like, the same attempt at optimism and so on. So maybe by the time all of those young demonstrators have reached middle age, some of the villains in the world will have moved on.
Yeah, we can but hope. Jenny.
Well, I'm old as well, and my father was in the Air Force, and one of his secret duties, he was actually first in line for dealing with any nuclear occasion. Needless to say, he lived with PTSD until he died 18 months ago at the age of 97.
Wow.
Anyway, that's an aside. I just want to throw in something controversial. If we believe that we're all part of nature, there comes a point where killing is part of life. Have we overpopulated the planet? Have we reached a stage where it is only going to be a natural catastrophe or a man-made catastrophe that is going to actually permit some future continuation of life on Earth as we have known it? I don't know if that makes, if I'm clear in what I'm saying, but just natural disasters are part of nature. Is warfare an inevitable part of nature as well?
It's an it's an inevitable part of human nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, does the Charter say anything about human need to in some way constrain and manage its own population? Does it? I don't think it does it? See, one of the feelings as I'm listening to the discussion is that this charter was drafted a long time ago in a time when there was perhaps more stability in the world, less complexity certainly, and now we're in a very different environment, and maybe it doesn't recognize that in its I know it says things like that in the context, but somehow, and I'm going back to what Russ said, this mismatch between the ideals and the reality, somehow those ideals themselves have to engage with this reality. Yeah, I don't know.
Norman, I'm just looking at 16F, which says recognize that peace is the wholeness created by right relationships with oneself, other persons, other cultures, other life, Earth, and the larger whole of which we're all a part.
Yes.
And that's the only place that I could find that sort of link.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of right relationships, that's a really key question. I don't know what a right relationship is, because my right relationship might not be the right one for the continuation of the Earth. That's a slight aside. I would say, Jenny, that one of the things I always remember, I got someone wise having said, war is nature's way of controlling humankind, the population.
It puts us back in where we belong, yes.
Yeah. And so do catastrophe.
But yeah, we can imagine now where we are in 2024 scenarios which are going to create elitist, technologically enabled human beings versus the rest. That wasn't in the framing of this Earth Charter 20, 30 years ago. That was not visualized, but that is the reality now, that we're working steadily towards those sorts of things, which are scary, and to the point where human beings might not be as we are. They might be part machine, part humankind. So these are things, I think, that are now in the frame that weren't in the frame when this original charter was conceptualized.
Yeah, and there's the issue between what's technically possible and what's desirable. Because do we continue with things that, and this was the question to go back to the nuclear issue. This was the question that was posed by the scientists who developed the splitting the atom.
Yeah.
They could foresee future potentially.
Well, in many ways, we've seen some of that in our lifetimes, haven't we? New treatments, new possibilities for supporting people living longer, surviving illnesses and conditions that would have been life-limiting before. We've seen some of this happen already. This is, I know you're talking about something which is a step change, different, Norman, but we have seen that. And when we think about population, we're also thinking about people living a lot longer, aren't we? As well as more babies, more young people. And we see some of the problems where population there have been attempts to control population, misfiring and creating even bigger issues. But I think you're right.
If resource consumption is if you like, related directly, as it must be, to the number of human beings on the planet, then that is, as Jenny has pointed out, a very significant issue that the Charter has to engage with.
Yes.
And this whole discussion makes me feel more and more impotent, to come back to my word.
Well, yes. So,
and can I just say one more thing then? I think so where are the visionary leaders that are going to lead us in a different direction? There just aren't any. That's another aspect of the political world of which we now recognize. There are no visionary leaders that are using some of the ideals in here to create better societies, better civilizations.
Maybe there are people who think they're visionary because they're dealing with the pains that people have, but that isn't always the direction that we're thinking about with the Earth Charter, is it?
But I mean, Russ mentioned the debate tonight on television. Will we get visionary ideas there? No, it will be all pragmatic, nuts and bolts, reaction to the electorate, reaction to the media. There's nothing visionary about politics these days.
No, sorry, I'm thinking about Make America Great. That's visionary, isn't it? But maybe not great in terms of the Earth Charter.
Well, that's why I say, all we have is our power as voters. And even that, really, I'm questioning how powerful that actually is.
Well, unless we have the power to work with others, to influence others to think about these things, and then in their turn to use their votes, because a single vote doesn't feel like much, does it? Although obviously people have paid a great price to get that vote. It doesn't feel like much at times, does it?
Well, going back to Russ's point about joining a demonstration for rebellion, is it that we have to now ourselves find communities to work with, which means that, the sort of multiplier effect that what we do combined with what everybody else does in that community is going to have more impact and eventually cause more change than we can do by ourselves? Is that the implication of this discussion?
Learning from ants.
Yeah. Sorry, what did you say, Glyn? I didn't catch that.
Learning from ants. A-N-T-S. Yeah.
Or maybe It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Oh, that film. How much one person touches other people. Maybe that's slightly, I'm slightly alarmed by the armies of ants image. Maybe we should, this is a very big overarching conversation about the Earth Charter, and maybe others will want to say something about this in future meetings. And we've said quite a lot and left quite a few things kind of hanging for others to pick up. Should we focus in on what we have thought we could do? Because there's this feeling of impotence, which hopefully we're not seeing in the projects or initiatives or ideas about how we might take this forward. Shall we talk about those ideas and maybe make ourselves feel a little less impotent? Does that seem like a good idea?
I don't want to be negative again, but my sense is that what my project would be is what I'm doing anyway. I've been doing for the last 50 odd years. maybe I can conceptualize it and put it in the context of the charter, but the charter itself hasn't been responsible for my taking any new action.
So look, we've now got 4 examples. Jenny was one of the early ones, and Melissa, and now Zara today. And as I've seen the way other people have approached it, it's dawning on me that what this is about is almost creating not a statement, but a narrative about who you are, who you've been,
Yeah.
how you've come to be who you are, and what you see in your own visionary way, what you see your future to be, I guess, trying to line up with some of the idealistic things in this charter. So that to me now has completely turned on its head what I thought a personal statement was. And I'm ashamed to say I started off as a sort of box ticking exercise. There's a statement. How can I relate to that? Do I believe it? And that's pathetic. So thanks to having my eyes open, I can see that what this really is about. And therefore, Jenny, going back to what you just said, it is not surprising that your project is something that you are carrying on, that you've been involved in for 50 years, because it is us, it is who we are.
Yes, and that was very much clear in Zara's statement.
Yes, if you read that, that's also shared on the Lifewide website. It was posted quite late today, wasn't it? So there's now 4 of those statements.
Yeah. So I'm going to have a go at redrafting mine as well, I think, because I think now I've seen the light, I'm going to try and do it differently.
Well, there are contrasting statements, aren't there? Those 4 are all very different, even though we're all apparently addressing what the Earth Charter said to us and how we relate to it. So that might be helpful for other people to look at the differences, because obviously we are all different, and so maybe we will approach this differently.
Well, I showed you the stages I went through, and I actually took out a lot of the anecdotal supporting evidence before I got to the final page and a bit that I ended up with.
Yes.
For example, that there was anecdotal stuff about growing up in the 60s with someone who was in the armed forces, and I grew up with moving around as part of the armed forces, so it was very close at hand. The reality of what could happen.
Well, I suppose we'll edit, as you did, what we write, but it's the process, and that you thought about that. That's the.
But maybe I need to go back and put it back in if we're coming to
Well,
write.
no, Jenny, that's my personal reflection on what I think this is now is and the reason that therefore it's embedded in us. Those statements are not statements on words on paper. They are fundamentally who we are, and that is why we can reproduce them in new situations, because it's how we think about things. It's how we read a situation and then want to respond to it is drawing ourselves, who we are, into that situation. And that's why there must be a beautiful consistency between what we say we believe, well, maybe not always, but what we say we believe and what we actually act on and do.
In the mid 60s, I came across a book called Personal Values in the Modern World. It was a required reader. So I read it, and it was by someone called Valentine. It's just come into my head now as we were talking. What I see is that, Jenny, you said you've gone through the process of the anecdotes, and you're wondering whether or not you should return to them. I then visualized a bubble coming out. You know, one of these you can have a set of text, and then you can have almost like a footnote relating to that particular element of text. I saw bubble coming out with the anecdote, which was the embellishment. And I thought that really then makes it real, and it enables the reader or viewer on screen to almost put themselves in that person to gain more. The actual, it's an enriching facility, right?
But that then begs the question of what is the purpose of these statements? Is it for
Yeah.
our personal use, or is it for sharing and maybe stimulating other people's
Exactly
thoughts?
so. Yeah. Because you've been stimulated, all of us have been stimulated by what other people have written. And so there is value in both the synthesis, but also in the lived reality.
Yeah, I think also it's about understanding self. I think it's
Yeah,
about understanding. I mean, you took beautifully that last principle in 16F, was it? This on about the relationship. I think it's all about us helping ourselves to understand our relationships with the world and so on, as well as sharing with other people.
Speaking as someone who did write and kept my kind of anecdotes in, I felt that I was pulling threads from the past in to see where what I'm thinking about now may have started. I don't know that I thought about it like that at the time. It's nothing in my life ever makes sense until I'm looking back at it, driving it forward. Yeah, I don't, but so it was that kind of process of seeing, well, maybe that's where this started and that's why I feel like this. So maybe I didn't do the next step that you did, Jenny, which was then to kind of distill from that. But I included those threads in what I wrote, that those historical things in my life, because that's where I saw the threads coming from.
Well, I like, Glyn, your idea of maybe having some speech bubbles to add those back in.
Yeah.
I read too many comic strips when I was a child.
What? We didn't have the internet then, did we?
That's the thread you've pulled. Yes.
Yeah.
I was encouraged talking about the personal role of our personal roles in this, and thinking about what I wanted to be doing over the next few months by some things. I mean, obviously, I'm still thinking of the kind of thing I've been doing before, because all sorts of things have happened to make some of that take steps backward or take steps forward in what I was trying to achieve before. But I started to see things. I mean, there's obviously I've been focused on a garden. That garden has disappeared in the last few months. It literally has disappeared. It's kind of been bulldozed, that garden. So things that I was thinking about, things I thought about doing are no longer building on something. They're starting again. But I heard people talk about, I mean, there's this amazing book published tomorrow called One Garden Against the World, I think. Yeah, One Garden Against the World. And it's by Kate Bradbury. And she is talking about her life, her complicated life with her mother, but also about her garden. And I thought One Garden Against the World sounded a brilliant kind of flag to wave, because that's almost what we're doing. It may not be a garden, it may be something completely different, but it's this little focus but pool of hope and way forward and hope to influence other people and all of those things. So I felt quite encouraged by some of the things that I have seen other people doing, because other people are doing it, and that feels like a movement rather than me just as an individual. But I think the scale of the challenge, One Garden Against the World, encapsulates it. It's one person in the Earth Charter with all the complexities we've talked about. So I felt there was some hope and some encouragement that other people were also thinking like us, even though they're not part of our group, remarkably.
You said something there, Melissa, which I think is important, because we talked about working with communities or small groups to have more impact, more effect. And I think this joining movements, and I guess, you know, Russ's Extinction Rebellion, there's a, and so just to give you an example, what we're doing in our local area is we're sort of running a series of talks on gardening for biodiversity, and we're not getting large numbers of people there, but you know, somewhere between 10 and 30, I think. We've done 3 of them so far, and we've got 1 more to do. And through that sort of social gathering and awareness raising, we're trying then to encourage people to do something more in their gardens. I mean, a lot of people are already doing a lot of stuff for nature, but it's really good to engage people and for them to think, yeah, we're part of a small group here, but collectively we are going to make some sort of impact. And it's been, as I say, it's been really rejuvenating to see how people have embraced the idea of doing something small, something additional to what they're already doing, and then collectively seeing how, and that requires a sort of coordination and keeping people connected, but being able to then show people that they're having an impact at some sort of scale. And the garden is a brilliant, if you have a garden, obviously not everybody does. If you have a garden, that's a brilliant place to show that you can have a positive impact on the world.
Yeah. I only have a little bit of a garden, and I'm moving to where I'll have no garden, but I'm using someone else's garden. They don't know really yet, but I'm using someone else's garden. So you don't have to have a garden.
No.
You can, I'm just saying, there are ways.
Or pots.
Yep.
Containers, you know, yeah, anything.
Yeah.
But isn't this just a metaphor for what each of us is in our own way is doing, which is giving us a sense of motivation and optimism
and agency
as well, yes. But making what our life while we're here is meaningful for us, as well as maybe having an impact for the future.
Yes.
Meaningful for ourselves as well.
Yes. Russ.
Getting on with your neighbours is really important, isn't it? In fact, it's like a kind of small metaphor for, you know, countries getting on with each other and different sets of values, but helping each other. And I've benefited enormously from that because I've got a neighbour on each side of my garden. Well, there's one at the end, but they're a bit inaccessible. But there's a neighbour on each side of my small garden, and they're only too willing to lend me some of their equipment to help me trim down bits of tree and to cut the hedges that are straddling both gardens, you know, and to get out their superior shears and things, their electric stuff, and loppers for chopping down the little twigs off the highest things in the garden. Don't need them anymore because I had a big lump of tree chopped off. But I suppose in a way, it struck me as we were talking that this is like a very small metaphor for the world. My garden is a small metaphor for a part of the world.
Yeah.
Get on with your neighbours. There we are.
That's your project, is it?
Well, my neighbours actually are a bit too tidy and a bit too strict. They're too controlling of nature, in my opinion. You know, and they chop stuff down and they put paving in different places where it would have been nicer just to have a bit of untidy grass and stuff like that.
Well, that's your influence possibility.
Yeah. I'm going to save our gardens.
Yeah.
But I think we're also demonstrating that no man is an island, and that we're not going to have an impact individually. Well, we may have, but we need the collective power.
Anyway, can I also just say, because I'm going to sign off in a moment, that if you want to join in with the demo, it starts at Park Lane, and we'll march. It's not a long march, but it'll be a slow one because there'll be loads of people there. Hope it doesn't get attacked by bad people. It was fine last time I went on,
Yeah.
but you never know, do you? Anyway,
Most
so maybe
police officers,
like an
Russ,
outing up to
most
London.
police officers are good people. And
Yeah.
so when we see you on the television,
Make sure you're wearing your Lifewide t-shirt.
Well, that's a good point, isn't it? I ought to get one, oughtn't I? Yeah. Gosh.
We probably are coming to the end now. There's about 5 minutes of our budgeted time. Have we come to a conclusion? Have we found a way forward?
Yeah. Don't give
not so much. Yeah, don't give up. Not so much a conclusion, but I think it's just a work in progress. I think all these ideas are they're all bubbling, and I think we just have to keep doing the things that we believe in are important to help us move towards this more sustainable future, and share our progress or lack of it and what happens. And I think that way we all learn together, as we've always done.
Yes, and often we've found that, as you say, Norman, as we've always done, we've often found that aims that we started off with have been hard to achieve, but along the way, all sorts of interesting things have happened. And often we don't achieve what we had set out to, but we've meandered into other things and enriched the thinking, because we might have been thinking, and maybe that's quite an interesting thing about having clear aims and goals, is that you might forget to notice the scenery on the way.
Yep.
So we'll continue to share what's happening on our journeys.
Yep. So in the next meeting, I guess we will share little bits of the sorts of things we've tried to do that connect to our values and beliefs, basically, within that statement framework.
Great.
I'm looking to the future. I mean, is there any mileage in looking into publication? Just some.
Well, I mean, we always have the magazine, but you're talking now about a book, aren't you, Jenny? Chapters in a book.
Or even not even as extensive as a book, but just a booklet.
A booklet, yes. Well, why not? I'm sure we can. We have it within our means to do that, don't we? As long as we can get enough contributions, I think.
I just also wonder, in this strive towards good against evil, which it was my first thought when I saw the Earth Charter, to become the influencers, which is the term today for the people who are the idealistic leaders, the visionary leaders. Some of them are quite good, but actually to make the best use of the technology available, to become influencers, one towards the knowledge and awareness of the Earth Charter, and two towards seeking, because it does set out the ideals on which the SDG seem to have been derived, from which they seem to have been derived. So
we have to go to TikTok, don't we?
yeah,
It's got to be a lot of different media, hasn't it, to do that? Well, why don't we can think about that for the next meeting, or share ideas before the meeting, and let's have a few experiments.
And I have one question, because I was talking with a very dear old friend, and she said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." So my question was, can we draw in other people?
Yes, and some we did do those kind of collaborative projects, didn't we, where we each had a kind of more people than ourselves involved, and some of those people may be worthwhile resurrecting, reconnecting with. Sorry, that was rather doom laden, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying to involve a lot of people where I live.
Yeah.
But I'm not
Yeah.
saying this is about the Earth Charter. I'm saying this is about, trying to create,
Yes.
in my case, a biodiversity park. But so it's trying to find something that could be relevant to whatever the content, whatever the people are.
Yeah.
And in a sense, almost by subterfuge, reveal that you are working towards ideals within the Earth Charter.
Yes.
I
If
like subterfuge, yeah.
if someone asks you, then you have the opportunity to talk to them about that, don't you? What is driving you to do this? What is the context for your involvement in this? Mm.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. So are we talking about that kind of thing, the possibilities for making this more, what we're doing more well known, of sharing what's happening, the booklet, the idea of TikTok, I'm thinking of podcasts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be interesting.
Podcast would be a good thing, yeah, if we could
Yeah. Well,
create
maybe,
content.
yeah, maybe they're all worthwhile thinking about between now and the next meeting, but maybe having a focus at the next meeting.
Yeah. I've not actually been inspired by the stuff I've seen on the Earth Charter. People who have been promoting it, tends to be quite, well, not very inspiring to me anyway. I think simply because of the things we've talked about in terms of scale and idealism rather than practical reality
Mm,
like people every day.
yeah. Okay, well, we could address that. We could do something different.
Mhm.
We're probably over our time now. Shall we draw this to a close? But thank you everybody for contributing. This has been quite a thoughtful, I mean, they're usually thoughtful, but we were very kind of obviously thoughtful today, weren't we? So I'll be really interested to hear what others who are viewing this after this has all happened and it's available as a recording, what they want to say.
Thank you,
Brilliant.
Melissa. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
Phil.
Go carefully, Russ. Go carefully.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.